Oh. Okay, so apparently I need to backtrack because I had not hit start on there. If you do I think it's popperjs.org. If you just look for popper.js on Google, you'll find it, but it looks like it's popper.js.org. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit for everybody on the stream because I apparently forgot to start streaming. I forgot to hit the go live button. So npm uninstall popper.js core. Actually, I should be able to just ditch all this. There. So back to where we were. Okay. I apologize for everybody on stream because I apparently forgot to start streaming. We have it fixed now. So the first thing I wanted to remark is make sure that you run npm install to get all your existing packages installed, which is the debug, the .env, and Express. And then what I went through and want to do here is then install jQuery and Popper and Bootstrap and Bootswatch, all of those. So one by one, npm install jQuery, npm install Bootstrap, npm install Bootswatch. Okay, Bootswatch, Bootstrap, jQuery, and the other one I wanted to get was Popper, and that turns out to be here. Okay, so if you would go ahead and install all of those dependencies, and then we'll go on to the next thing. I'll come around and make sure everybody's up to date. Need what? Remember, NodeMon is a global install. Right? So anytime you install something globally, it doesn't delete your package. It's not going to hurt if it is, though. I would remove it because you can get some conflicts because then you're talking about you have one version installed globally on your machine and a different version installed in your project, and that doesn't always work. So you have all those installed here. Yeah, you want to install that with the copy paste dash. You just need to install it. You just need to grab the copy paste dash. It's not finding your package not based on time, which you don't have it. So you didn't upload it to Git, or what happened to printing and before you did those installs. You have a lock file. Huh? So that's like the username. When you have that started with app, it's like app AWD is the user. It's like the company. Some package under it. Okay. What are you doing with Mint? The small package. We're not doing anything with Mint. We're not doing anything with Mint. I don't know even know what Mint is, but we're not doing anything with that. So go back to Visual Studio Code. Delete that file. Delete the package.json. So you don't create that file manually, you create it through the database. So open up the terminal. So we went through yesterday. We'll run npm space init. Init, like initialization. No I. It's not install init, it's just npm init. I-N-I-T. Yep. You want to spell it right? Controls. Go. npm space I-N-I-T. Short for initialization. So you're going to get a questionnaire there. You need to yeah.
I think I filled out and I'm not going to I think I'm not going to try to download everything, but like it created its own package that makes some file and the whole modules thing. I moved it away because I went back and then I kind of restarted it a little bit.
Okay.
But
okay. All right. So we've got those dependencies installed. So now we want to actually use them, right? So normally we would download all those things and we would just put them into like our public folder where we want them to be. We would put them in our CS folder and our JS folder, okay? But there, remember, these are now in the Node modules folder, right? So how can I access those, right? It's not available to our front end, right? Because the front end can only access things that are either published as a route, right? Or in that public folder, right? So how do we get to it? How can we open up a way for our front end to be able to get some of those files that are in Node modules? What did we do yesterday to make these files available? Huh?
Something with path.
Okay, we did something with path here. What is this doing? Somebody explain me what is the purpose of that one? Okay, well that's this one, right? So here I'm saying what? I'm saying the root, right? I'm assigning if they request that root path, then we're going to send back index.html, right? I also had set up other paths yesterday where I said, for instance, if we request the favicon.ico file, then I want to return public favicon.ico, right? So I need to add some more routes to get to the files in Node modules. You with me? So I need to add some routes to be able to get to that. Now, before we kind of dive into actually making those routes, we need to find out where the files are actually located. Okay, so let's take a look into node modules, which is kind of a scary hole to dive into, right? Because as soon as I jump into node modules, how many folders are there already in my node modules folder? Too many, right? I've only installed a few things, right? I've got under 10 dependencies, but those dependencies have dependencies, right? So all of these folders are things those things I've already installed, they need to operate, right? So there's going to be a lot of stuff in here that is needed for those projects we just installed, okay? So what I want to do is go through there and actually just find the folders for the ones we're using. There's a lot in there, and that's just how it's going to be. There's going to be a lot of things because we can't change what their dependencies are. So let's look at maybe jQuery first. So if I scroll all the way down to the queues, somewhere in here, or actually, sorry, J's, down to the J's, I should find jQuery, right? So let's look at what's in the jQuery folder, because there's a folder for each of our dependencies, okay? See if I can make this much bigger. So if I'm looking at jQuery, okay, does anybody see some JavaScript files or JavaScript files there for jQuery in the jQuery folder? See, they have their own package.json. We can see that. Okay, there's a few other random files in here, but notice there doesn't seem to be any JavaScript files there. Okay. Now, if I dig a little bit deeper into jQuery, right? If I look under source, I can see, okay, there's some stuff under source, and the stuff under source is if we wanted to build and work with jQuery and potentially modify it ourselves, that's where we would go into. But there's another folder here called dist, and this is the one that we generally want to look for. Can anybody guess what dist is short for? Distribution or distributable, right? So what you're going to find in dist is the compiled version of the thing, right? The version that we don't have to compile, it's already compiled for us, right? So if I look under dist, I'm going to find the files that we're used to. You see that? So there's the jQuery file, jQuery.js, there's jQuery min.js, jQuery slim, jQuery slim min, right? So which of these files do we want? Which of these jQuery files do we want? Well, the second one, jQuery min.js. So I could create a route. One way I could deal with this is I could create a route just for that file. Does that make sense? I could create a route just for that file. The other way I can do it is I could just publish the entire dist folder, right? That second route is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to make the entire folder, this distributable folder, available as a route. Does that make sense? So everything that's in this folder here will be available to be used to the front end. So let me scale the size down back a little bit. So I want to add a route. So after we've added the route for our public files, I'm going to add a route for those jQuery files. Okay. So let's add app.use, and I'm going to mount this to /jQuery. Okay, so /jQuery is going to allow me to get to the jQuery files. And then from there, I'm going to say express.static. Right? And remember, static needs to then know the path to the folder that we want to mount things up with. Right? So there, that's going to be node modules /jQuery/dist. So all the folders that are now in this dist folder will be effectively mounted under /jQuery.
Why is it /jQuery, not just slash?
What do you mean?
That line, yeah, like right there.
Right, so this is where I'm mounting it, right? Here I'm mounting public at the root. I don't want to mount my jQuery files up at the root. I want them to be in their own folder so that they don't overwrite anything. I don't want to intermingle with them, because then if I have two files named the same thing, I'm going to get a problem because I'll only be able to get to one of them. Does that make sense?
No, I'm not getting it. Because public and the node module appear to be at the same level in the folder. You know, you look in your...
Let's just trust me on this. This is what it needs to be, and we'll look at it in the browser in a minute. Just do this. Okay, just trust me on that for a minute. Okay, so that's what I need to put in there, right? Let me start the server, and now we can see what's happening. So I'm going to go npm. Actually, I've got my script set up to run program 3, so I'm just going to run it from here. Okay, so I've got my server running. Let's refresh. So what port is it running on? It's running on port 5001. Okay, so when I visit just localhost 4001, which route am I going to get the home page? I'm going this route. I'm going that route. Okay. Now, if I ask for /index.html, right, that's also going to give me the home page. But what route is dealing with that route? What route is giving me index.html? Which of these lines of code is serving up that path index.html? Huh? Nope, this one's only serving it up if I go to the root, right? If I type in index.html, right, you see how I've got that typed in there in the address bar? May or may not. I don't think I can make that any bigger.
The one with public in it. Public.
Right, it's this one, right? So let's watch. Let's say I comment this first route out. Okay. If I go to the root, looks like I'm still getting something. Did I not save it? Okay, it seems to be doing that now. So let me do it the other way around. So comment that out, right? So I'm not serving up the public folder, right? If I go to index.html now, there we go. See how it says it can't find it? See, it says it can't find it. So the only path I'm setting up here is that root path. There's no other way to get to it. Once I put this in here, I'm saying that everything in public is treated as it's part of the root, right? It's not treated as it's public / whatever, right? If I type in, if I try to go this as, well, did I? Oh, I didn't save my file. That's right. So I can get to it as index.html, but if I try to access it as public, right, you see I can't find it, right? It's not routed that way. It's not set up that way.
That's why it's blank.
That's why this is blank. Now, if I had set this up this way, right, as /public there, right, now it would, the route to it would be public index.html. See that? If I had set it up that way, then the route to that file is public index.html. The problem with doing it that way is then all of my files, all my HTML files, all my CSS files, everything has to know that public is at the root, right? I want to write my CSS and my HTML and my JavaScript as if the root was at public. Does that make sense? This would, if I have it set up this way, it's going to break most of my files.
If you just type in localhost 5001, does it put that for you? Because I just show my page without that.
It works, but notice that there's a problem, right? I can get to the home page, but notice that the font has changed, right? So I have a CSS style sheet in there, and maybe I should go change the background color so this is more, or something so it's more visible. Let's say I change the body to background white. Okay. Or just green. So this should make it pretty obvious, assuming there. Okay. This should make it pretty obvious if I have my CSS, right? Yeah, maybe just green. Okay. So the way I have this, you can see I'm at public index.html and all my CSS is working, right? See that? Okay. All my CSS is working. Let me go back to the root. Where's my CSS? I'm getting the home page, but I'm not getting my CSS. Why is that?
I don't know. Mine's working with the CSS at just the root.
Uh-huh.
No, just look over those 5,000.
Right. So because I've mounted this at public, right? That's why it's different, right? So if I've mounted that at public, then where is my CSS mounted? Where's my main CSS file? What's the route to it right now? What's the full route to it? How do I get to the main CSS file? Okay, so it's slash, you said, and then public, slash public CSS main CSS, right? Where is my home page looking for it? It's looking at from where the web page is, right? It's looking from where the web page is to main CSS. So right now my home page is looking for it not with public. Does that make sense? I would have to go through and change all of these if I mount it this way. Does that make sense?
You'd have to put the public CSS.
I'd have to put public everywhere. Okay, well let's try that real quick. Okay, so let me put public in there. Okay, now it works here. Right? So it's all good, right? It's all good, right? Okay, let's try something now. Public index.html. That's broken. Right? So if I mount it if I mount it to public, there's no way for me to make it work, because if you go to the home page, it's either going to have the CSS or not, and then when I go to the actual page, if I'm navigating and I come back to the home page, then it's not going to have the CSS, right? So if I put in public, I'm screwed both ways, right? There's no way for me to make it work, because sometimes the path to the CSS file is this, and sometimes the path is different. So I need those files. I need the files in root I have to have them mounted as if they were at the root. If you don't do that, it will not, there's no way to make it work.
So that line right there, not that one, but the.
So I'm going to remove the public here.
JS file, that line 13, 12.
Line 12, yeah.
It's pretty common.
Like, it has to be that way.
We're going to see that a lot.
Yeah. Every server you write, every application, every server and project that you write for the entire semester will have that line in there verbatim.
Love that kind of stuff. Tell us that.
That's not going to change. It has to be that way. So, because you're going to put your stuff in public, you need it to be routed out the root. Now, with jQuery, it's a little bit of a different story because I don't want those things mounted at the root. I do want it mounted in a jQuery folder, right? So if you remember, we were looking at jQuery, right? What's the name of the file here? It's jQuery min.js, right? So that's the file we want to get to, right? If I'm looking in the browser, remember I've mounted this dist folder to the as the folder jQuery, right? So what's my path right now? What is the path to the jQuery file as far as the browser is concerned? Well, it's going to be jQuery/jQuery.min.js. See that? So that's where it's mounted. Okay. I don't want to mount that at the root because what would the path be to it if I routed it if I mounted at the root? What's the path? Yeah, unfortunately I can't make my address bar any bigger.
Yeah, I got jQuery/jQuery.min.js.
I can make Notepad bigger. Right? So this is the path to it right now. If I'd mounted it at the root instead of mounting it at jQuery, well, the path to it would be like this, right? It would be like this if I'd mounted jQuery to the root. Okay. Problem there is the first thing I mount is kind of what it goes through each of the things from top to bottom and says, oh, is there a file here? Is there a file here? Is there a file here? So if I have two files by the same name, let's say I have a file in public and a file in jQuery that have the same name, whichever one I list first is going to be the one that's visible. So by me mounting this to /jQuery, it doesn't hide any other files. Okay, and one of the reasons I want to do that is sometimes some of the other things, like what if Bootstrap were to also include jQuery files? Well, then there's a jQuery file in Bootstrap and there's a jQuery file in the jQuery. Which one I get depends on which one I mount first. So just to make sure that they don't interact, they're not overlapping, that's why I'm mounting it this way. Okay, so that's me mounting jQuery. Let's also mount Bootstrap using the same mechanism. So if I look in Bootstrap, okay, this is something, unfortunately, we kind of have to look at the folder structure one by one. So if I look at Bootstrap, I can see that there is a dist folder, a JS folder, the SCSS folder. Which folder do I want? Probably dist again, right? So there are JavaScript files here, and you could potentially use those. The reality is these JS and the SCSS, these Sass and JS files, you only want to use those if you're using Webpack. Okay. If you're using Webpack, then those are great. You can use those. But because we're not there, we're going to be using the dist versions. So I'm going to also mount Bootstrap, the dist, as a folder Bootstrap. So here we've got jQuery, and then we've got Bootstrap. So this is mounted as Node modules Bootstrap dist. Okay. So now it looks like to the browser, all those files there are in the Bootstrap folder. All the jQuery files are in the jQuery folder. So how your files look actually on your computer is not how it's structured as far as the browser is concerned. Does that make sense? Do you follow that? That's part of what we're doing with this routing, is we're kind of creating this virtual folder structure for the browser, but that folder structure is not representative of what it actually looks like on our file system. Any questions on mounting Bootstrap there?
There was a further folder after this, JS.
There's a JS and there's a CS folder. Yeah, because remember, Bootstrap includes both JavaScript and CSS, right? That's okay. It just means that when we refer to those in our actual HTML page, we'll have to put in those paths. Okay. So I've got jQuery and Bootstrap. What was one of the other dependencies that we brought in? What was one of the other dependencies that we installed? We installed Bootswatch, right? So I'm probably going to want to do the same thing for Bootswatch. It's probably going to look something like this. Bootswatch goes to node modules bootstrap.dist/dist. But do I probably need to go check the folder structure just to make sure that's right? Okay, let's go look at Bootswatch. Okay, because if I remember right, Bootswatch looks a little bit different. Okay, so Bootswatch does have a dist folder, right? What's inside of the dist folder? There's a lot more folders, isn't there? Right? So what are each of these folders under dist? I've got Cerulean, Cosmo, Cyborg, Darkly, Flatly, Journal, Lux. Those are all the themes, right? Those are all the themes. So under dist, there's a folder for each theme, right? So I've downloaded, that's one of the benefits of doing this through NPM. I've just downloaded all of the themes. So I can actually easily just swap in another one if I want to. If I look into here, right, let's say under Lux, see I've got a few different files. So I've got one named Bootstrap Swatch, Sass, variable Sass, bootstrap.css, bootstrap.min.css. So if I'm using this, which of those 4 files do I want?
Always the minimized one.
It's the minimized one, right? So it's going to be bootstrap min CSS, right? So that's the one we want to refer to, okay? So we'll come back to that. Okay, so our mounting's good though. We're going to just mount everything in dist again. What about Popper? That's our next one. Let me go find Popper. Now, if I go look under the P's, am I going to find Popper? I'm not going to find it under the P's. Why? Because it was an at Popper.js, right? So I actually need to go up top. I'm going to look for here. We see at Popper.js. And actually inside of that, there's another folder named core. And then we actually get to dist. So to load up Popper, I'm going to mount this as Popper. But this is going to be node modules at Popper.js. /core/dist. So that's what I need to add in there to actually load up Popper.
Why did you not put at the beginning with /Popper?
I'd rather not have special characters when I actually go use this. As far as the virtual view, right? Because not all browsers are necessarily treat special characters in the URL maybe the same way, or they may not be allowed. Yep.
Okay.
Daniel? Okay.
Okay, so if I went into the browser, the port 5000 /Popper/ whatever min.
Yeah.
What is the actual one that we use?
Which actually, yeah, I think we needed the CJS version. I'm not sure about that. I'll have to look at that. I remember Popper was odd. Of these three,
Yeah.
I don't remember for sure. The deal, what it comes down to, I think CJS is short for Common JS. ESM is another moduling system. It's basically, there's actually 3 different versions of Popper right here.
Okay, so this first part in the before the Express static, that is sort of like a user-friendly way to show the path when we're on the browser.
Right. So when we're on the browser, just typing in /popper.js basically gets you to that folder now.
Yeah, you can call it whatever you want. It just makes sense to
make it as simple as possible. Yeah. Because this is what we'll actually need to end up putting into our actual HTML files. That actually is another folder. It's kind of collapsing it. Yep. So in Windows file system, typically the slashes go this way. But in Linux, they typically go the other way. And when we're doing things on the web, we always go the other way. We go, I think those are considered forward slashes. So we're going to be using forward slashes here, even though Windows has them as backslashes.
It won't work if you put backslashes.
It might work, it might not. If I put 4 backslashes in here, for one, I will have to escape the backslash, so I'll have to have slash and then slash. I'll have to have 2 slashes like this. If I want to put a forward slash, I have to put, or backslash, I have to put 2 because I have to escape the backslash to put a backslash. Right? Because remember, a backslash is a special character. Remember, you got /n or /t, /r, right? So, like /n is new line. Well, slashes are special. So, if I put those in, then I have problems. So, yes, they should be going that direction. Just get into that habit of all your paths going as forward slashes, not backslashes. Yeah. Yeah. And so we're going to follow the pattern that you see in the browser, because that's the same pattern that it is on Linux. And Windows is okay. It's actually, Windows is ambivalent. It usually works both ways. But Linux is very picky, and your browser is very picky that they have to be forward slashes. So, okay, so we've got those things hooked up, right? Now, I created paths for them, right? So the browser can get to the files now, but am I actually using those files yet? Do I actually have Bootstrap and jQuery? Do I have that in my homepage yet? No, right? So I still need to add in some links and some script tags to actually connect those two. Does that make sense? Okay. So The good news is it's very close to what you're used to. I just need to make sure I'm referring to the right folder, right? So let's say I want to add in my Bootstrap, right? That's my CSS file. Okay, so let's add in a link. Link relationship is style sheet. And the href is what? Now, you'll notice when I try to type in the href, you see how IntelliSense is suggesting me folders and file names? See that? Well, it suggests that based on where the files and folders are on your computer, right? It doesn't know what it actually looks like when you're running the server. Right? So my IntelliSense is not going to be able to tell me what's in the jQuery folder, because as far as it knows, the jQuery folder doesn't exist, or the Bootstrap folder doesn't exist. So I need to just type in, Bootstrap. So /bootstrap / what? I think it's bootstrap .min.css. Right? I believe that's going to be my file name. Oh. You're right. Because remember when we looked at the dist folder, there was a CSS folder there. Okay. So assuming that's right, how can I check it? Right? How can I check in the browser that I actually have Bootstrap working? Well, one hint obviously is the font changed, right? If I have it wrong, say I go to F12, see I've got the console, right? Right now there's no errors, right? So if I have it wrong like I had previously, I didn't have that CSS folder in there. See what error you're going to see in the console? It says, refuse to apply style, yada, 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 because this MIME type is text HTML. See, so if you're having a problem, you definitely want to make sure you check the console, right, to see that you don't have errors with loading your style sheets or loading your JavaScript files. Everybody with me? Maybe not. Okay. What else could I add to this page that might be, somebody give me a Bootstrap class that I could use in my code down here, just to, again, verify that I actually have Bootstrap installed. Container. Okay, that's a really good one. What tag should I put my container on? Huh?
Just a class, div class container.
So just a div? Okay. So let's say I do that. Okay. I might also briefly, so I can do that there. I might say, well, maybe we make this H1, maybe we make it centered. So class text center. Right? Save that. Okay. So cool. I have Bootstrap up and running. Okay. All right. What about jQuery? So what do I need to do to to bring in jQuery? Hey, Ben, what do I need to do to bring in jQuery? Okay, so I need a script tag, you're right. Okay, what attributes does it need to have? Huh? You have source, right? And remember, I'm not going to get a suggestion here because it doesn't know where it is, right? So you remember how I started this with slash bootstrap? I'm going to start this with slash jQuery. And then I'm going to say, I think it was jQuery min.js. And similarly for bootstrap, huh? Because it's not actually a folder on my computer, right? The only thing that's the IntelliSense suggests is folders that you have in public. Right? It doesn't know about any of these aliases, any of these paths that we've created. So VS Code is only suggesting you things that are physically there on your computer, right? It's not. It's here. See? So I've created this route, right? This is kind of what we can think of as sort of there's a virtual directory, right? So it's as if there is a proper directory and a bootstrap directory. It exists there virtually as far as the browser is concerned, but it's not actually there on the file system. Huh? No, you're not gonna. You should not see. If you see node modules on your front end code that you're shipping to the browser, you're doing something wrong and you have a major security leak. Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to leak your node modules folder. You don't want to leak the entire thing out to the internet. That's a problem.
For just here, though, even though it wouldn't be correct, you could do a hard link to it, right? Where you would go up a level. Right? I
will take off points if you do that.
I know that. You could do that and it would work.
You could link node modules like we did public, right? I could say we'll link node modules to node modules, right? I could do that. Right? If I did this, then you could get to anything in your node modules folder. But you absolutely do not want to do that from a security standpoint, because you're opening a lot of security holes as soon as you do that. Is that clear? So that's why we're not seeing node modules in there, is because we've routed it or mapped it down at a lower level. So we're only exposing part of that. Okay. So we've got jQuery, we've got Bootstrap. If I go to the browser, I say refresh. Let's look at F12. Okay. So there's no errors, right? But do I know that jQuery and Bootstrap are successfully installed? Do I know that or not? How can I check and verify that they're actually installed, that they're actually working and available? Set up a debug? Okay. Let's go to the Sources tab. Okay. Yep. And what do I see here? Okay. I could go into the index.html. I could actually follow any of these links if I go in here. But if I actually look in here, you see how there's this Bootstrap folder that the browser sees now? You see that under Sources? So I can actually go into there and see that these files exist. So I can see Bootstrap min CSS, I can see Bootstrap CSS, I can see Bootstrap min.js. Right, so I can see to the browser it looks like there's a jQuery folder, it looks like there's a Bootstrap folder. And it basically looks like they are in the public folder, right? It looks as if this jQuery folder and this Bootstrap folder is under public, even though it's actually not there. Does that make sense? You with me now? Any questions about, so you, Paul, you were asking about getting Bootswatch installed. Does that make sense now?
Yeah. You go back to the code.
Yep.
Put another script in, I think. Another one for Bootstrap.
Put another one for Bootstrap. You know.
Okay, I missed that. Why do we do it like that? You got a link. One's JS and one. Okay.
Yeah. That's just because of that's how they set it up in the dist folder.
Yeah, I got the CSS, but I don't see the JS in there.
Okay. So we did bring in the Bootswatch themes, right? What if I want to actually use one of those Bootswatch themes? How can I switch that over?
You have to put the theme name in the path, right?
Right. So I need the appropriate style sheet is what I'm looking for, right? So let's comment out the Bootstrap style sheet. We'll bring in the Bootswatch style sheet instead, right? So yeah, I need to put in the name of the theme. So let's say I want to pull in Sketchy. Okay, pull in the Sketchy theme. Okay, so that's going to be Bootstrap, Bootswatch /Sketchy /Bootstrap min CSS. So I bring that up in here. You can see how my font changed. So if I want to bring in Bootswatch, it kind of looks like that. Which actually makes it even easier to switch in a theme, because all I got to do now is change this path from Bootstrap CSS to Bootswatch / the name of the file. Done.
Yeah. For the Bootswatch on the NPM website, 2 thumbs down. It gives you like one line to go off of.
Yeah.
0 help.
No, I'm all of these. As far as what I've looked on NPM, won't tell you that you need to do this, unfortunately. But that's what you need to do, because all of them, I think jQuery. If you look at on NPM for jQuery, Bootstrap, and Bootswatch, all of those are actually assuming that you're using something called Webpack. So that's all they're giving you instructions for. Which
what is that?
Webpack?
So that's something with Google Chrome.
No, has nothing to do with Chrome. So you're thinking WebKit.
Yeah.
WebKit. So Webpack, what it does is it can take your JavaScript files and your HTML files and your CSS files, and it's able to do a lot of pre-processing on them to make them better before you actually ship them to your user. So it can compress them, remove a lot of white space, minifying. You've seen all these minified files from Bootstrap and from jQuery. Part of how you get that is you use Webpack to do that minification. So it allows you to do a lot of things that you might want to do to optimize your resources for production use. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. You also can potentially you can do some trickery to say, well, I don't need all of Bootstrap. Let me just bring in the parts of Bootstrap that I want. Or I don't need all of jQuery. Let me just bring in the parts of jQuery that I want. So those are things that you can't just do by using these compiled files, these distributable files. You have to actually kind of go back to the source files to be able to do it that way. So that's what their assumption is, and that's why the documentation seems so weird, is because they're assuming that you're using Webpack. Any questions about this so far? So you can remember, you can still download these files just like you did previously. You can download them, put in your CSS and your JavaScript file as long as you put them in that public folder. But if you want to pull them down through npm, that's what you need to do, is you need to set up a route to kind of create this virtual folder for each of those dependencies, and then you can refer to them using those virtual routes.
So, Steve, so there must be a reason why. Like, let's say we go through all this, we make all these beautiful dependencies and all this good. So I have files called Node 1. Why can't I copy Node 1 and call it Node 2? And then just go from there and just go in my website and run all these basic things out.
You could. Please don't do that.
I'm wondering why.
So two reasons. First of all, if you only do it once, you don't get experience with it, because getting understanding and really getting experience with it, getting practice so you understand it and so you just have it to you, means that you need some amount of repetition, right? You don't learn how to do something by doing it once. Nobody learns how to do something by doing it once. So that's where you need to do it more than once, right? So I've asked for you to do how many different projects for this lab, for this set of labs? Well, it's 3, right? So I've asked you to do the same thing 3 times, right? That's going to give you some, if you start from the ground up, from scratch and get up, by the time you get done with that 3rd one, how well do you think you're going to understand it? Pretty well, right? But if you just say, I'm going to copy the folder, call it Node 2. Copy the folder, call it Node 3. What have you learned in copy and pasting? You've learned nothing, right? You have a bunch of files that you have no idea what they do. It just it works, right? So if you start from nothing and build up piece by piece, then you start to understand every piece, and you start to see what happens when one piece is missing, right? Which means that then you can go fix it when there's a problem with one of those pieces, right? If you say, here's Node 1, I'm going to copy it and call it Node 2, something broke, right? What happens when your whole website goes down? Your users are calling you and saying, I can't order socks. I can't order belts. I can't order boots, right? And you say, I can't help them because I just copied and pasted folders. Right? I want you to be able to help the users when they have a problem, right? So in order to do that, you do need to do it more than once. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The other thing is, you saw how many folders are in Node modules? That folder takes a long time to copy. It will take a long time to copy. And it will take an even longer time as the semester goes on, because that Node modules folder will get bigger. Okay, so if you're copying the folder, it's going to take you a long time to copy Node modules. Or if you're trying to zip it up, that zip file will be very, very big, because Node modules is very, very big. Everything in Node modules put together is going to be bigger than your application, right? Your application is probably going to be a megabyte or less, right? Versus you might have several hundred megs worth of stuff in Node modules. Does that follow? Okay. All right, so let's see. So we talked about how to bring those packages in, and that took a little bit longer than planned. I think we definitely need to take a break. So let's take a break and come back at 2:30. And the thing I want to get into is make sure that you kind of show you how to actually build a form that does something. That's the next part that I want to do, is let's build a form that actually does something. Cool. So come back at 2:30 and we'll look at that.
So I downloaded the poppers in the beach watch. It's not popping up in my notes. Yep.
Hit the refresh button if you're saying, yep.
Go to this folder. Use this in the browser.
That's all.
I don't know where you just have to refresh. But make that the where it's going to look. You're just going to follow it back. So the better way of organizing it, that way you're out of your browser, you don't have to measure it right out on your machine. It's kind of working.
Because that means that then you can, like, things change on the back end, everybody has to optimize all that things change on the front end. Well, IntelliSense doesn't know about it until they're moving Let's go to your browser. Go pull up and form this file. No, these are your actual. Yeah, these are actual. Go to the browser. Look at sources. See how under sources it looks like there is a bootstrap folder, and you go so expand that. It looks like you're adding what is let's go with these very similar. Yeah. See you have an extra slash. So there we go. So as far as the browser is concerned, you see the browser see it as if it's actually a bootstrap. Yeah, it thinks that there's bootstrap. It also thinks that there is inside the program. See that? See the files? Okay. So it looks like there's a folder named jQuery with that file in it, right? So is that folder, jQuery folder, actually exists? No, does it actually exist?
Go to your package.
Where is this one? What file do you have open that you're looking for? That is indexation. Right. Where is indexation? Right there. No. Go to your folder. Your folder here. Where is indexation? Okay, it's in the public folder. Okay. Okay. So according to your web page, it's saying that there's a jQuery folder basically inside of your public folder. Is there actually a jQuery folder inside of your public? No. Right? Is there actually a bootstrap folder in your public? So neither of those are just real folders, right? But they're not real folders. Ignore the fact that there's something over in the models.
The browser is only it's like I only think real is public. Public is real. It's not public, it's not real. That's
No,
browser.
real has to do with where it actually is basically known as as far as your life is concerned, if I'm looking at this in file explorer, right? Does the jQuery folder exist? Well, no, it doesn't, right? It's not real. Windows doesn't know about it.
When I mean, here it doesn't know that. Because I mean.
It doesn't exist. It's not real. It's not there because it's not. It doesn't exist.
Because it's not.
There is no public. Okay, in public. Right?
We're in public right now.
This is what we're talking about. We're talking about middleware virtual directories. We're talking about what does it actually look like on the computer. Go look at file explorer. When you go look at hard drive, it's not a good. There is no directory folder. Because it's a virtual folder. This is virtual directory. Those are physical folders, right? What you're looking at in File Explorer, that's the physical folder file. Those are the real folders. Those are the real folders. Yes. What the browser sees is not real folders. That's a file, right? And then you see that's file. Yes. But it's not. You have mirror this on your drive. You have it from the browser sees it. Well, that's next. So to make the browser see it, that's what we call virtual directories.
The browser sees it virtually.
We're talking about how the browser sees it. Those are the virtual directories. The real or the physical directories are what you see in files. Right. When you're looking at IntelliSense, does it look at virtual directories for some reason or physical directories? Like GitHub. Look at the real directories and what is it in my source with real directories. Or your your IntelliSense knows about the real directories.
And I never did it because it's not part of the browser. So I've got like
IntelliSense
The browser can't see this. The
Like
browser
thousands
can see this thing.
I mean, IntelliSense is not open. Which is wrong. Right? IntelliSense is suggesting it from the Windows perspective, which is wrong.
that's just
Because when you actually run it in the browser, it's built in the browser perspective. So IntelliSense should be suggesting in the browser perspective. It can't do that because it's general.
oh yeah, well yeah, that
It's not just for them. It's for all sorts of programs. So all it's able to suggest to you is what you actually see. Without running
we have a package lock.
I understand how it is the virtual directory. Browser.
and then
IntelliSense is not.
Do you have all yours in your folder?
But you did say
It should just be
not there. I see it there.
from the computer's perspective, it's not there. It's not
I
there.
thought the browser perspective is not there.
From the computer's perspective, you're changing, right? You're in the middle of this. You're saying, oh, it's now in it's there from the computer perspective. In that process, you're jumping and making an assumption that the computer doesn't think.
all caps
Computer is stuck in public. Computer stuck in public.
Right, where does index studies not?
Okay, so you can't see outside of it.
Well, where is the modules? The modules outside public.
So the computer can't see outside of it.
So from the computer's perspective, the route from index.html to bootstrap is dot, you have to go up the directory, down to node modules, down to jQuery, down to the JavaScript file.
So they're only coming out of public.
That's, and you have to tell it to come out. You can't make that assumption. You have to tell it to come out. And then come out. If you look at it from the browser's perspective, index is at the root. You can't go. You can't go. Because public is after. You can't go up. Yeah.
Oh, I said. IntelliSense sees it if I go //
Yeah.
IntelliSense can see it.
Yes, IntelliSense can see it, but IntelliSense is wrong because as soon as if you type in that path, IntelliSense will tell you it's fine.
That's everything out.
Yeah, IntelliSense is going to say, oh, that's fine. You can do ... node modules, yada, yada, yada. But as soon as you go to the browser, it'll say, I can't find that file. Right. Because the whole point is that your real directories, your physical directories, are different from your virtual directories. They're not the same structure. Question. To me, this looks really stretched. Can anybody actually read the projector already?
It's just faded for me. Yeah.
It's just a light.
If we turn off the lights.
Let me see. Then I have an idea. File. Is that better?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a lot better.
Let me try a slightly different one because that looks. File. Preferences. Color theme. No. Yeah, we'll just go with that. Tooltips, and I believe it's also used for the modal dialogues. Modal dialogues. If you want to pop up a dialog box, I believe you also need Popper. Like Bootstrap uses it there.
On your program. Yeah, let's move that back one back.
Okay. So it's 2:30. Let's get back to going. If I can get your attention again, we'll get back started here. What I want to do next is build out a contact form, and we'll build out one that's actually kind of working to some degree, or at least working more than the previous ones that we built. So remember, we talked about how to build it from the front end perspective, but we really haven't gone into the back end yet, right? So first things first, I need to build that form out. So in public, I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call that contact.html because I need to lay that I need to lay that foundation for the front end. Exclamation mark tab to get started. This is going to be our contact form. And you don't need to code along with this part. I'll give you this file in a minute. I'll just throw it up on Discord so you can get this contact form. Okay. So first thing I need on this page is an H1 contact form. What tag do I need to be around my whole form? Form, okay. What properties do I need to have on my form tag? Action and method, right? Okay. Probably also want an ID. So contact form. My method is going to be post. We talked about that a little bit already, but you'll see where that comes into play. So method post, and then I need this action. Okay. And we just got done talking about this idea of routes and kind of this virtual directory idea. What I'm going to put in here as my action is going to be a route that I haven't created yet. Okay. So I'm going to post it to /contact. Okay. That action, that route doesn't exist yet. Okay. So this form were to submit, it's going to get an error as that page doesn't exist. Okay. We'll fix that in a minute. Okay, but that is probably the most important thing to pay attention to as we kind of go through this part of the example, is the action and the method. Okay. All right. So in here I need some fields. So remember each of these fields, I'm going to use this kind of bootstrapify this as I go. So I need to have this be a form group. I need a label. So let's say we call this our name. I'll have a field here, input. I need an ID. ID name. Name is name. And my what else do I need in here? I need a type, so type text. Form control, yep. So I need that to be which attribute? That's the class, right? So class form control, because I want to style it as such. Okay, so we've got that. Is there anything else I'm missing in here? I don't. So I need to fix that real quick using for. So for name, this is the label for the name field. And then let's say we'll keep this really simple, so we'll have just two fields. So I'm going to have the name and I'm going to have a message. Actually, I want this to be a text area. Okay. Now I just need a submit button. So let's add that in here. Class form group. Button. Type submit. Class. So I need that to be btn primary. We'll call that sent. Okay. So that's a good start to a form. Now if I want to actually look at this in the browser, where do I need to go? Because I can't just right click this, open up in live server now. How do I get to this contact.html? Yep, exactly that simple. Because remember, everything in public we rounded at the root. Okay, so there's my contact form. Okay, you'll notice that it's got no styling on it, right? So I still need to add in my bootstrap stuff. So let's quickly, I'm going to pop back over to index. The only thing I really need is the link to, I'm going to just bring in this boot swatch theme. Okay.
Boot swatch stands on its own, right? You don't need really that's in place of the
Correct.
bootstrap.
In place of the bootstrap CSS. You still need the bootstrap JavaScript.
Right, from the bootstrap website.
Yeah. Well, from the NPM package.
Yeah, you need to install.
So like if I'm using it here, you see that's from the bootstrap package.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got a contact form, and I've got a little bit of CSS on it. We're good. Okay. So I can submit this form. What do we see here? Cannot post to /contact, right? /contact. What does that mean? Because we've seen this error before. This is not a new error. There's no file there, right? There's nothing to send it to. And now, what I'm really trying to send it to is not a file, but a route, right? So the thing is that there's no route there, okay? So I need to create this /contact route. I need to define that in my application, right? So here, I might want to do, let's go back to my app. Okay, so we're working in program 3 right now. Right, so I've defined some paths around here, and I've used app use to bring in a lot of things. So let's define a few paths. So first I'm going to find a get route. So this is going to be /contact. Okay. Oh. So when you go there, when you go to /contact, I want to send contact.html, right? Now, I did mention briefly I want to send you this file, so I'm going to go ahead and add that into Discord here. Projects. Actually, this is on my desktop. Node 1, public, contact.html. Okay, so that contact form that we just built there is in Discord, so you can grab it. Okay, so first thing I want to do is I actually want to create a route, probably for /contact, and what this allows me to do is if in the browser I can just go to /contact, right? That with a GET request. Okay, so I can go to /contact, but it still isn't there when I post, right? So that way this way I can get to it as contact instead of just contact.html, which is convenient and good for SEO. But I need another route for when it's post. So I've got one for app get. I'm going to have another one for app post. So let's just say when you post it to /contact. What I'm going to say is, let's say form submitted. Let's just start with that. Cool. So in response to that endpoint, in response to that route, it's just always going to say form submitted. Remember we saw this yesterday when we were looking at, just send. I can just send a string back instead of sending a file back. Okay. So if I go to the browser and I try my form now, see how it says form submitted? See that? So I'm establishing here's a route for the get, right? So that get is going to be my empty form, right? And then when they submit it, it's going to go to this post route. That makes sense? When we go visit the page, when we just type it into the address bar, I'm going to go to this one, and then when they submit it, it's going to go to that route. Okay. Any questions? So I've got a way to send a response back, right? I've got a way to respond now to when the form is submitted, right? But have I actually done anything with the data that they put into the form? I haven't, right? I haven't done anything with that data yet, okay? So what I'd like to do is extract those fields that they filled in and use them to maybe do something, right? And an easy approach right now would be to just log those inputs, right? Log what's being sent to us, okay? So you'll remember the parameters to this function. I've got one called REQ and RES. What are those short for? Request and response, right? So the request is this group of data that's being sent to us. The response is what we're sending back, right? So where am I going to find the parameters that the user entered in the form? Are those going to be on the request or on the response? Maybe on the request, right? So the request contains that data, okay? So let's see if we can find that data. So if I type in REQ dot, okay, we'll start to see some parameters. We'll start to see a bunch of properties on this request object. Now, if I remember right, I think it's either params or body is the one we want to get to. I think if you go to .query, that's like things that are in your URL string. Query gives you those. I think that body, it's either body or params is that one. Let me try params real quick. So if I say params, and then it gives me some things here, but if I remember right, you just put in the name of the thing that you want. So here on the contact form, remember we've given both of these fields a name, so name and message. So I think there is one other step I have to do, but let's just say I do this real quick. So let's log out the name. And maybe I want to log it out as with some more helpful strings. So maybe I say name is equal to $. So I'm using my template string to log this out in a more kind of user-friendly manner. Okay, so I've got that. I can pull my terminal back up. View terminal. Okay, so now when we submit the form, we should see if I have my cards in the right order, I should see something, but I don't think I will. I think that I still have something I need to do. So let's try to submit it without anything there. You can see it says name equals undefined. Okay, so we're definitely not have anything there yet. Let's say Paul as my name. It's still showing up as undefined. Now I think that, let me try body real quick just to make sure. I think that there is something I have to add in order for that to function. Yeah, no, I think it's params. So in order for it to actually kind of extract the data that's being posted with the form, if I remember, I do have to add something in called some middleware, right? So we've already added some middleware in here with that express static and app use. Anytime you add in middleware, you're going to use app use. Okay. So before all this runs, I'm going to go up here and say app.use. And I think, if I remember right, the middleware that I need, I think, is Express URL encoded. So if I remember right, that's what I've got to put in there.
What does the Express do? Again?
Well, Express refers to this dependency here. Remember?
Okay, yeah, we wrote that as
That's an NPM
a method or a
package.
function that's within the Express package, right?
Well, Express it is a function, but it's also an object. So it also has methods. So we can call it like a function because it is a function, but it also actually has methods. So like URL encoded is a method of the Express object, and static is also a method there. So let me see, save. Okay, I'm missing something. Let me pull up the finished example that I have. So projects. Because under unit 1, so by the way, if you look in your repo under unit 1, you'll find a folder called examples, and I've actually got 2 examples here. One kind of doing this contact form with Express and one doing with Node, so you can look at those kind of finished examples if you want to. But I'm going to pull this up because I know that I'm missing something here. So index.js. Where's my... Okay, so it is request.body. Oh, I need to add an extended. Okay, got it. So there's a switch I have to add into the URL encoded to make this work now, because they changed things. So extended is false. Looks like false. So extended false. And then this is request body. Okay. Continue. There we go. Okay. So I submit the form, right? So I have Paul, maybe Paul Smith, hit send, and you can see it now being logged. So in order to get to the values from the form, what you need to do is first include this line, app use express URL encoded extended false. Okay. So that's going to tell it to try and read any of that post data that gets sent. If it doesn't do that, it just kind of ignores the posted data.
Does it matter which order already have get in that?
It does. It absolutely matters. The order is really, really important.
It doesn't recognize how to read it. Why would it be after you post it?
Because the GET request, right, when you ask for the form initially, right, that's one request. When you post that, that's another request. Right, so it's actually 2 trips to the server, right? So the first trip to the server, it can kind of go through there and get to the GET. The second trip, it goes through this whole process again, right? Because they're 2 separate requests. The GET and the post are 2 separate requests. So this needs to happen first because this needs to be a variable for any routes that may need it. If I put it down later, then it won't have run, right? It won't have run before those routes execute. So, okay. So I've got the name. I've got that being logged. I might also want to look at the message. Same kind of thing. Right, so right now I haven't filled in a message. You can see that with message is equal to blank, right? Let me go back in and put in a message. Okay, so you can see the data coming to the server now. See that? So I fill in the fields on the form, they come back to the server, and they're going to be request body and then the name of the field. Right? Remember when we created the form, we had to put an ID and a name on all those fields. Let me show you real quickly what happens if I leave off the name. Okay, so let's say we don't give the message field a name, right? So I'm just taking that off. I'm going to go back to the form, refresh it. So Paul Smith, test message. I'm going to hit send. Okay. What's the message now? It's undefined, right? So any fields on your form that don't have a name, they are not sent to the server. If it doesn't have a name, you won't get it when you go to the server. It will look as if the user left that field blank, or more specifically, actually shows up as undefined. Right? It doesn't show up as empty string, it's showing up as undefined. Because you saw when I left the field blank, what did it come in as? Came in as empty string. Versus here, if I don't have a name, it's coming in as undefined. Okay, so we've got that data going to the server. We can look at it. What else might we want to do from this point? What else might we want to do with a contact form? Do we want to check that the inputs are valid? Okay. So what can I do to check that they've actually given me a name and a message? How can I do that validation? Make sure they're not empty. Okay. How can I do that? How do we do that with the client-side validation?
Dollar sign and checking the value.
Okay. What? Hold up a second. Dollar sign. What does that dollar sign represent? The dollar sign represents jQuery, right? So jQuery is a tool that we can use on the front end to work with the DOM, right? When I'm writing stuff for the back end, for the server, do I have an HTML document or a DOM? I don't, right? So actually on the back end, I won't use jQuery at all. It doesn't make any sense for me to use jQuery, right? jQuery only has value on the front end, right? So we won't see any dollar signs in here. Okay. So let's think about it kind of the way that we built the previous code, right? So what was the first thing that I did? I grabbed the inputs and I saved them to some variables to make it easier to work with them, right? So let's say const name is equal to request body.name, const message is equal to request.body.message. Right, so I started with this same structure on my front-end validation, right, where I got the values from the user. It's just the way that I get the values is different on the back end, right? I don't use jQuery to go look at what's in the field. I use this request object. Okay. So you were saying something about falsy, right? Which is true, right? So how do I check if the name is valid or not?
If exclamation point name.
Okay, which is right, but why would I want to say not? Why would I want to use that exclamation mark? I'm saying if there's not a name there, right, then we want to do something. Okay, so if they don't provide me a name, well, somehow I need to let the browser know that the user needs to fix that, right? Somehow I need to let the browser know that they have an invalid input. Okay.
Response.
So I could do that, right?
params. all the input.
So let's say I say aria send, and maybe we send a message saying name not provided. We could do a similar thing for the message. Okay. So this is definitely not the whole picture, but let's start with this. Okay, let's see what this is going to do. I'm going to go back to my form. It's empty now. I'm just going to hit submit. Okay. So what did I get back? Did I get back a message that says both the name and the message are not provided? See that? It shouldn't have told me both of those things. I've just got the first one, right? So let's look real quick in the terminal because I do have my terminal closed. Because we should see there's some errors happening here. And it says cannot set headers after sent to the client. Okay, so there's a problem because send does two things. It writes the headers and then it writes the body of the response. But that headers, once you start writing the body of the content, as far as HTTP is concerned, you can't have more headers, right? With HTTP, you have to have all the headers and then the body. All the headers and then the body. But the way we've got it right now, it's trying to do headers, body, headers, body. So as soon as it tries to do that second send, it crashes. Okay. Well, what could I do instead? Well, if I don't use send, but I use write in all of these places, so I change all of these sends to write, let's see what happens. So instead of calling send, which also sends headers, let's call write and refresh the browser. Okay. So you see how it starts just spinning? See, I refresh the form, it's spinning because I haven't ever ended the response. I've written some things to the response, but I never ended the response. Okay, so the last write, I actually need to change whatever the last write is. I need to have an end. So I need to call res end, and that could be this. I could do it as this line. I'm going to do that down here because that's actually going to make the code easier in a minute. Okay, there we go. So now that I've ended the response, everything's there in the browser. Okay, so what does the browser say? It says name not provided, message not provided, form submitted. It's all kind of smushed together, right? I don't want that, right? That's not very user-friendly. How can I make that more user-friendly? Probably don't want that all in one line, right? Okay, so let's try that. Where do you want to put the slash ends? After the writes. Okay, so at the end of these strings, let's put a slash n. Okay, so we're kind of playing around with this. Try it again. Okay, so they're on separate lines. Okay, that's maybe a little bit better. Okay. Probably shouldn't say form submitted if there's invalid data, right? So how can I prevent it from saying that? How can I prevent it from saying form submitted when one of the fields is invalid? Okay, let's try it. it's a reasonable suggestion. Okay, so I put it in an else. Okay, so it's not there right now. What happens if, but there's a problem here. See how it says name not provided, then form submitted? If I have the name but not the, if I have the message but not the name. Right, so this else only goes with that if. Right? This else only goes with that if. Okay? Give me a different solution. Zach, give me a different solution. How are we going to fix this? So just putting in an else didn't work.
I'm kind of blind.
Okay. Daniel. I could use a Boolean, right? Yeah. So that's a good way to do this. So just kind of like how we did our front-end validation. Okay. What I usually call that Boolean is valid. Do you think I have a reason for using that name? I have a reason for using that name. And I would actually suggest you stick with that name. I saw a bunch of different names for that variable. I would recommend sticking with is valid because it has a well understood meaning, right? It says, is this valid or not, right? It's really clear from this. Would anybody in here think that false means that it's valid? Right? There's no way to read this as false being valid, okay? But if I say something like this, okay, does false mean that if I call it check, does false mean that the values are good, or does it mean that the values are bad? I can't tell. If I say verify, are the values false, or is false good or bad? I can't tell, right? So it's really important, really important. If you have a variable of a Boolean data type, you need to have that name be very clear about what's true and what's false. Because, and this always becomes a problem in real world software, because it's like, okay, they gave it this name, and then I go look through and I have to actually read the code. I have to read the whole function to figure out if true is a good thing or true is a bad thing. Right? I don't want to do that. I want to say when I declare the variable, I want to know what true and false mean. Right? So if I say is invalid, okay, what does false mean? False is valid, right? Because true would be invalid. Okay. What if I say is bad? Right? Is false valid or invalid? It's valid, right? Because I know that it's the backwards of the other thing. So right? I know if this is true that it is bad, right? But if I just say bad, does true mean that it's bad, or does it mean that it's not bad? I don't know, right? Right? So it may seem like a few extra characters that I'm constantly adding on to that variable that I'm saying is, but it adds a lot of clarity. It adds a lot of clarity. So don't shorten your variables to the point that you can't tell what they are, right? I don't have a problem if everybody uses is valid the entire semester, because there's no question on what that variable means, right? Okay, so we're going to start by assuming that the form is valid, right? And then if we see any of these values, so I see, okay, the name's invalid, so we're going to say, all right, it's no longer valid. Okay? It stops being valid as soon as we find a problem. Same thing with the message. Okay? So we say, all right, so it's if I get an invalid name, it's no longer valid. If I don't have a message, it's no longer valid. All right, so now that I have that Boolean, okay. Now remember, I asked you what does true and false mean? So with is valid, right? What case do I want to write form submitted? When it's true, right? So if is valid, then I'm going to write form submitted. And maybe otherwise I want to write something different. Right? So what could I write in this case? Maybe something along the lines, please fix the errors above. Right? Now, obviously, it doesn't have to be that text. That's just the text that I made up here. Right? So when I submit this form now, I'm getting some feedback. Cool. So if I submit everything in there, I have a name and a message. It's saying form submitted. If I leave blank, it's telling me that. Okay, so that seems like a decent start, right? What's next? What's our next step? Is this a user-friendly form yet? Is this a user-friendly form yet? Would you want to use this form? Probably not yet, right? So what are the problems that make it not very user-friendly? Okay, so every time you mess up, right, every time I submit the form, it takes me to another page, right? It's taking me to another page, and this page just tells me what I did wrong, right? It doesn't let me come back easily and fix the problem. I mean, I can hit back arrow and come back. Yep.
All that logic stuff before all your bootstrap and all
No, my bootstrap stuff is in a completely separate file. What file am I in right now? Program 3. This is my Node stuff. Okay. This is in this app post, right? This is the route, the post route for /contact. So when I post something, which is where my form is posting, it's posting to /contact. Okay, so it's handling that form post.
That has to match what's in the form.
Yep, it has to match the method and the action, right?
Yeah, I noticed in mine, it'll change from contact HTML to just contact. Would it be better just to put in the form contact HTML to see if you can refresh the page?
Typically no. Typically no. It's actually better from an SEO standpoint to strip off the file extensions.
Okay.
It's actually better for it to just be /contact. But because I've created this route, I can do potentially maybe a refresh. The problem actually with the refresh here, look, if I go to this, I've submitted the form, right? What happens when I refresh it? You see this prompt? Confirm before resubmission. So because the way I got to this page was through a post request, it's actually redoing that post request every time I refresh the page. It's using that same data. So I can't just refresh the page and get back to that previous page. Okay. But what I can do is I can go into the URL and click enter. Because remember, anytime I go through the address bar, that is a GET request. That is a GET request.
116.
Yeah,
post. Does that have anything to do with the method of post?
Yes. That's what the word post is here.
If our method was GET, capital G, then that would be GET.
No, this is the GET one right here, lowercase. The name of the method is actually lowercase. It has to be lowercase.
I'm trying to understand, like, now that we've got all this code written, get a picture of what's going on. So we got GET, which is.
So if I make a GET request to /contact, I get this. If I make a post request to /contact, I get that. There's two different routes.
How could your front-end code, you're just covering both cases?
Right. So this one allows me to go to /contact by typing it into the address bar. The second one, the post request, handles when I hit submit.
Say that one more time. It's not saying.
So when I type in /contact in the address bar, that is a GET request, which goes to this route. When I submit the form,
that gets the form and puts it on the page.
Right. So the first time it's a GET request, the second time it's a post request.
So that displays it on the screen by going to that.
Well, the idea with submitting the form is you want something to happen, right?
Hitting the button to submit it, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's the post. I got that part. When you type it in the address bar.
That's just to get the form. Yeah, to get the blank form.
Get the form, right. That's not, okay.
Yeah. So, okay. So we've got this kind of set up here, right? So yes, one problem is it's going to another page, right? That is one problem. What else?
No formatting.
No formatting whatsoever. Yep. Because I'm just sending back a plain text file, right? I'm not sending back an HTML file, right? I'd like to send back a plain text. I'd like to send back HTML, and I'd like it not to redirect, right? Both of those things I'd like to happen. Okay. So, in order to do that, we need a few tools, and to do both of those things, we need a few tools, unfortunately, in our toolbox that we don't have yet, right? So the problem, first of all, with having it fill in, I think actually we might be able to do one of those. Having it being formatted, we might be able to do something around that. Let's say here, instead of calling res write in each of these cases, let's say maybe here I say res send file, and maybe we send back the contact form if there's anything invalid, right? So if they don't fill in the fields, we're going to send back the contact form. Okay. Now, something's not right. Let me look at my terminal. Unfortunately, I keep having to close this so I have enough screen space. Okay, now why am I getting a blank page? That seems really odd. It's not giving me an error about getting a back a blank page. Let's see. Oh, because I have this res end still there. That's why. I need to move the res end up. There we go. Okay. So if I say send file here, problem was that the end, I was ending it. So we send the file back, right? So if I hit submit, I get the contract form, right? Still get the contract form. Okay. Let's say I type in a value here. Submit. Where'd my value go? Right? I got the form back, but if I fill in these fields, I always seem to get back a blank form. See that? I always seem to get back a blank form. So I'm sending back the contact form, right? What's the initial values in these fields? Huh? Empty. Okay. Well, let's say I put, just for testing purposes, let's say I put some text in the message box by default. So we'll put 1, 2, 3. Okay. So initially, when I fill that in, okay, so there's 1, 2, 3 there. You see that? Hit send. 1, 2, 3 is still there. Let me change it. It goes whack, right? So whenever I load up this page, it's going back to whatever the initial values are. See that? It's going back to the initial values. So if I had some way to dynamically set those initial values, right, then I could keep those values there. Okay, so I don't want to go over it today because of time, but next week we need to go over something called handlebars, and that will let me actually inject those values back into there. Okay, so I can do that, but I need a tool that we haven't talked about. The other thing I could do is not redirect the page. That also needs a tool called Ajax. You might have heard of that in first semester. There might be I think there's a chapter about it. That's a tool that we can use to keep it from redirecting the page. So we'll need to go over those tools to kind of get you to that next step. So what do you think I want you to do with the labs for the time being? For right now. Huh? Yep, just let them go to that other page.
What you did in the else block there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, the way it did before with the plain text message.
Yep, just give them back some plain text right now. Right? Let that be okay.
Yeah. And just a note on the path.
Uh-huh.
I don't know, something about the formatter, auto formatter, inserted the word file right before. Done that twice now, and it's broken my code.
What do you mean the word file right before?
The back undo a little bit.
Okay.
To what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So does that make sense? So that's how I want you to start these. You know, build those out, labs out, using the tools you know. Send back a plain text response for now, and then next week we'll go over. Probably on Monday I'll go over handlebars so we can see that, and then later in the week we'll talk about Ajax and how to use those tools. Cool. Any questions? Okay. Let's call that a day, and then we'll kind of resume with handlebars on Monday. But you guys can work on these labs, you know, the rest of the day and through tomorrow if you're not taking the test. Paul, it looks like you're thinking.
Oh, yeah, this stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, we're here tomorrow though, right?
Yeah, we'll be back here tomorrow, back in 2:05. Any questions on the stream if people are there? Okay. All right, so I'm going to end the stream. I'll be in Discord.